Good afternoon, Eastern Washington. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from the capital of free Washington, the future state of liberty, Spokane Valley. Brought to you once again by the committee to elect Matt Shea, Republican, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news. And once again, this is not about right or left. It's about right and wrong. And we need to do the hard work to implement freedom because our hope is not in man but in Jesus Christ. And we can't end in prayer. We must also move to action. And as Exodus 15:3 says, the Lord is a warrior, the Lord is his name, are we warriors. And I want to talk specifically on Are We Warriors today. I want to read to you part of what I put out on the internet in regards to what happened over the weekend with NFL players deciding they were going to kneel during the national anthem. And I want to add some context here, but we, as Americans, true Americans, will fight and die for the right of people to say whatever they want to. And we have the right, too, to walk away and not participate in things. And I find it interesting that when Tim Tebow kneeled on the field in prayer, he was made fun of roundly by the same media out there right now and had very few supporters, at least within the NFL. When Coach Kennedy knelt at a high school in Bremerton in prayer on a football field, he was fired for it. And the hypocrisy that you see with this entire thing goes to show you, honestly, that their supposed motivations really aren't about America at all. Because they would have been standing for those gentlemen when they lowered a knee. They would have respected the other part of the First Amendment that talks about the freedom of religious expression. That's what freedom of religion means, living your Christianity beyond the four walls of the church. They would have understood, too, that what they did is a disgrace. And I want to read this letter to you. This is what I put out. Quote, "We are Americans. We stand upon what unites us. Our Constitution, our flag, our national anthem. We care more about our country than we do football. While you have the right to protest, and those of us who have served our country and our community would fight and die for your right to protest, we have the right to turn our backs on your disgraceful behavior. We have the right to call it out for the immature, ungrateful, ignorant tantrum that it is. You may not know it, our national anthem was written following the bombardment of Fort McHenry. Our flag was the target of British shells all night. In the morning, tattered and burned, it still flew in defiance of tyranny. Each time that flagpole was struck, a new group of Americans rushed out to raise it back up. And as the dawn it did break, lying underneath that scarred but undaunted flag was a pile of dead Americans whose bodies helped keep that pole upright. Now, some say that story is a myth. Historical accounts say the storm flag was lowered over Fort McHenry and the garrison flag raised, and only 4 people were killed and 24 wounded. I say regardless, it's symbolic of the American spirit. It's that spirit, the spirit of liberty and the courage and sacrifice that kept and keep it alive, that we honor when we stand for our national anthem. We only kneel before God. So by all means, continue to kneel in disgrace, NFL players. You testify against yourselves because you aren't what make America great. We are. We are the silent patriots who have died for this country, who live on and still sacrifice on a daily basis, who quietly live out our American values and ideals, not for money or for fanfare, who unashamedly honor our veterans and our first responders, and who fight even the smallest battles with a servant's heart. We do it because it's the right thing to do, because it's the honorable thing to do, and because we love America. Perhaps someday, when you can't buy that new Ferrari or that mansion on the beach, you might understand what it means to be part of a bigger team called the country. Until then, we will humbly exercise our right not to associate with you, your franchises, or your merchandise, in honor of all those who have made the ultimate sacrifice in defense of freedom and liberty. I think when I started writing that, it just kind of poured out that sums up the feeling of many Americans, many veterans, combat veterans especially, those that have seen what it's cost. And I think this is symbolic of what is happening in America today. You are either an American for the Constitution, the flag, for national anthem, that wants to follow the Lord in righteousness, or you're not. And situations and times like these where it's important that we understand which side we are on. And that brings us to your daily intelligence briefing on the international front. In the Middle East, the Kurdish independence vote yesterday. The vote count's still not officially in. I looked online just before the show, but most people believe that it is going to be an overwhelming vote for independence in Kurdistan. Now, Flashpoint Kirkuk. Kirkuk is a place that is claimed by many and is considered a disputed area, but what's important in Kirkuk is oil. There's a lot of oil there. And the entire United Nations tried to dissuade the Kurds from voting for independence. The United States even condemned it. And the Kurds went ahead with it anyway. 80% of registered voters had cast ballots. And the Kurdish leader says, and this is just about time. I mean, I'm paraphrasing that, and his name is Barzani, and he'd repeatedly ignored calls from everybody around him to not do this referendum for independence. Now, it is a non-binding referendum, but many believe, and especially with some of the situations that have happened in Turkey and in Iraq proper, with debates going on in Parliament about how to deal with the situation if the Kurds do move toward full independence, of what's going to happen, because the flashpoint is going to be between Iranian-backed Shia militias, Sunni militias, and the Iraqi government, and the Turks as well, over especially Kirkuk. So that's what you got to look at in the days ahead of what's going to be happening. There is going to be a flashpoint there. And the Kurds said, no, we want to vote for independence. We're going to ignore everybody else. And there was some saber rattling that, Turkey's president came out and said, well, we can cut the pipeline that allows the Iraqi Kurds to export oil. Iran banned flights to Erbil. That's one of the capital cities. Iraq's central government viewed the ballot as a potential trigger for disintegration. And I think that it's important to understand two things. First of all, you're not going to, if somebody wants to be independent, they're going to be independent. You can't force them to be part of something they don't want to be a part of. And number two, it's interesting that the Iraqi government had, I think just earlier this week, or yesterday, had negotiated this over the weekend, but had formalized essentially a treaty to make sure that the Peshmerga, the Kurdish forces, and the Iraqi forces could work together to get rid of the last vestiges of ISIS. So they realize they got to fight together to get rid of that last vestige of ISIS. But then after that, who knows what's going to happen. But that deal was consummated here a couple of days ago. And many people in Kurdistan just thinking this is the greatest day of their lives, according at least to The Guardian, quoting a couple people. So let's keep our eyes on this, but it is going to become a flashpoint, specifically Kirkuk, specifically because of the oil, and really specifically because you have Iranian-backed militias, you have Sunni militias from Iraq, you have the Turks, and you have the Kurds all in one area. And oh, by the way, there are Kurds in Syria, in Turkey, and part of Iran. So once again, the Middle East becoming more complex. And even though the vote count again is not in, it's very well expected that everybody's going to vote for independence, or the people that voted are going to vote for independence. On the international front as well, North Korea yesterday coming out with a very strongly worded statement that that essentially the United States has declared war on them. They are now going to act in self-defense and will shoot down any U.S. planes, even if they're not over North Korean airspace. Now, why is this important? Because, first of all, Monday is the media cycle when countries try to release these gigantic announcements like this so people take them apparently more seriously. And secondly, if they believe that war has been declared, are they saying then that the armistice that was signed is no longer valid and we are back at war? That this ceasefire is no longer valid. So, this could be one anti-aircraft missile launch away from devastation. And interestingly enough, on the other side of the globe, Russia has moved up rocket forces. Now, they understand that the Soviets have very large rocket and missile forces. It's part of their strategy. But they have moved up some of their rocket forces to the border or towards the border with Ukraine and Belarus. Now, Belarus is cooperating with Putin, but I think that this is a ploy by Russia to say, hey, you may want to pay attention over here and back off in North Korea. But that's happening. It's not very well reported, but that is happening right now. Also on the international front, very interesting situation in Spain. Now, we've mentioned this a couple times before on the show, but the Catalans, which is a part of northeast Spain, Catalonia, it has an economy larger than Portugal. It's one of the highly industrialized regions of Spain. They have been pushing for a vote on independence, a referendum on independence as well. Now, the Spanish government has arrested some of the leaders because this is scheduled for October 1st, this vote for independence for Catalonia. And so far, officials have seized almost 10 million paper ballots and imposed fines on those same top Catalan officials. So think of it as like a state, Catalonia, and the governor and many of the major top leaders in that state government have been arrested, have been fined, and then the ballots have been seized. So essentially they're saying to Catalonia, at the point of a gun, you must stay a part of our country. Well, that never ends well, because eventually people say, well, we've tried it the political way. Now we're going to take it to the bullet box, to the ammunition box, instead of the ballot box. This is just very dangerous escalation on the part of the Spanish. And a lot of the folks in Catalonia just believe that they believe very clearly that they're a more productive region, and they just want to be separate. They have different worldview. They have different culture. They have different heritage. It's sad to me that some people think that I guess you can put a gun to somebody's head and say, no, you're going to be in this relationship whether you want to or you want to be there or not. It's unbelievable. So the Catalonia secessionists are continuing to figure out how to carry out this independence referendum on October 1st, despite their leaders being arrested and fined, and despite the ballots being seized. I think it's something we need to keep our eyes on, but it underscores a very important point, that if people have already two separate worldviews and two separate cultures and heritages, or at least recognize them differently, and there really already are two people, there's nothing you're going to really do to keep them together. Eventually, if the Catalonians don't get any joy through this referendum, they're going to take it into the streets. And some of that is already actually happening. And people are calling it, Time.com actually is calling it the worst political crisis Spain has seen in decades. And a lot of the issues that are happening, are not just worldview. It's also tax issues, economic issues, and financial crisis. Does that sound like anywhere close to us? On the national front, Judge Roy Moore versus Luther Strange. The polls are closing at 7 p.m. And I'm going to keep my eye on this because this is one of the biggest races, the biggest indicator races this year. Judge Roy Moore, probably one of the bravest constitutional Christians of our era, versus Luther Strange, who unfortunately has been endorsed by Donald Trump. And, folks, Donald Trump's been getting some bad advice lately. He just has been getting some bad advice. Probably obligated himself to back this guy after Sessions left, but to become the AG, I don't know. But Judge Roy Moore, very clearly a principled man, leading in the polls by 10 as of 2 days ago. So I'm going to keep our eye on this one, and if the results come out, I will break in and give you the results of that race down in Alabama because it's so important. So important. Because Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, and others and Mike Lee need some help in the U.S. Senate. Also on the national front, Puerto Rico. Now, I want to talk about this because this is one of those situations where we can learn a lot of lessons, all right? Now, I find it interesting that KXOY reported on this and the devastation of Hurricane Maria, and this was the same station here 2 years ago who denigrated and dismissed, tried to poo-poo my calls for preparedness in the community. And it's interesting that the report that they talk about is just massive devastation. Well, I want to get to some very specific parts of what this means because this should drive home why we, as Americans, need to make sure we're prepared. So things are so bad in Puerto Rico right now. There's 10,000 plus federal employees on the ground. They are having to fly in food because there were not any apparent strategic food reserves. They are having to fly in water. So apparently they didn't have the ability on a mass scale to filter enough water for everybody. They're flying water in. Their hospitals are operating at capacity with 2 to 3 days of supplies left. Now, for those of you that don't know, on a normal given day, the average is about 95% capacity for most hospitals in Washington State. Okay, it probably holds true for North Idaho. You have communications that have been cut. You have thousands without power. They're running short on fuel for their generators. And at least one dam is crumbling. and may give way, adding further to the crisis. So look, folks, a month ago, most of the people in Puerto Rico didn't think they would be living through something that bad. They didn't think that power could be out, not for weeks, but potentially for months on end. They didn't think that food would run out after 72 hours or maybe even a week. They didn't think they would run out of water. They didn't think they'd run out of fuel. And yet that's exactly what's happening. And even with a robust federal response, with 10,000 plus employees down there helping with the recovery and the search and rescue and everything else, it is still a crisis. So that should underscore to all of us that we need to be ready, because things can literally change overnight. Also on the national front, Equifax hacked, 143 million exposed. Then Symantec coming out, and this is reported by Wired, that hackers gained control of our electrical grid to the extent they could have blacked it out at will. And then the Navy announced it's investigating whether or not a cybersecurity breach led to the collisions of those ships in the Pacific. So, folks, this is the front end. Many of you probably have been predicting this for a long time. This is the front end of real, true cyber warfare that's going on right now. So make sure you are doing what you can to protect yourself. Use encryption, Proton Mail, Start Mail, Unseen Mail. Make sure you're using encryption technology, or using maybe a VPN, because this is going to become normal that these attacks are happening on such large scales, and we need to take our own security, our own cybersecurity, personally, seriously. Also on the national front, flying cars by 2020. We talked about that last week, but what you didn't know is they just tested, finally, they just tested the drone taxi we've been talking about all summer in Dubai, tested successfully. They're going to continue to test this. And this is coming to us from Engadget. Dubai has Volocopter as the company that's doing this autonomous passenger vehicle. And it's capable of flying based on GPS tracks. And they're going to implement what they call full sense capability in the future. In other words, it could see and react all the way around. But the test happened, and they're reiterating that this could, you could catch a ride on one of these things in the next 5 years. So again, we're in the 2020 timeframe. Also on the regional front, the Bundy Ranch trial. Great group of legislators in Idaho with Rep. Dorothy Moon leading the way. Over 53 former and current Idaho legislators sending a letter to Attorney General Sessions saying, why are you prosecuting these guys? One jury in Oregon has already found some of those guys not guilty. And then 34 40 counts not guilty down in Nevada as well. Dan Love was fired. Now, he had been investigated, and there was corroborating evidence of impropriety on Dan Love's part. He was the head BLM agent. And that is all prompted Raul Labrador. Really applaud him for doing this, of sending a letter to Sessions as well, saying, is this really what we need to be doing, going after these ranchers, when maybe there's some other threats to this country we should be investigating? Also on the regional front, Joe Robertson released, and please send your thoughts and prayers out to him and his family. That was the man in Montana who did the great sin of digging a pond when the EPA didn't want him to. Also on the regional front, the Hearst study is now in from the Building Industry Association of Washington. This Hearst decision, this essential moratorium on well drilling, has resulted in $6.9 billion in lost economic activity predicted. And locally, here in the next couple weeks, county assessors are going to be coming out with numbers on the massive devaluation of property that has occurred. So it's having a devastating effect already, and those are the numbers and the facts. And once again, why those on the left over in Olympia need to start listening to the people in rural Washington and get this Hearst issue fixed so we actually can control our water again. On the local front, once again, if you get a chance, you can send your email to the governor on who you'd like the governor to select for county commissioner here in Spokane County. I've listed all of the contact information out there. Obviously, I support Rob Chase. I think he would do the best. He is very well qualified and has always been a man of dignity and honor. Also on the local front, October 12th, Trezzy Farm Winery, 6 o'clock up there at Green Bluff. Our annual Freedom Rally fundraiser. We're going to have the Eventbrite site up online here very shortly. And you can sign up, bring your friends and family. It's always a great night, fun night, and look forward to seeing you all there. Also on the local front, coming up here on Thursday at 6:30, so the 28th at 6:30, at La Bella V Event Center out off Barker Road. The Valley Council fundraiser is happening. Ed Pace, Caleb Collier, and Mike Munch. And if you want to support the capital of free Washington, it'd be a great event to turn out to, and that is the briefing. Remember, the antidote to dependency and socialism is to be a God-fearing, self-reliant, freedom-loving American. Thank you to everybody that has been praying for us. And if you get a chance, go to Facebook/Patriot Radio US, like the page, share it with your friends and family. And if you want to keep us on the air, you can always go to voteshea.com, donate to the campaign, help keep Patriot Radio broadcasting throughout all of Eastern Washington, Northeast Oregon, North Idaho, and through our podcast, way, way beyond. Well, it's my pleasure once again to introduce one of my favorite guests, one of my favorite people in America, Sheriff Richard Mack. Thank you very much for joining us on Patriot Radio again.
Well, absolutely, Matt. It's always good to be back home with you, and thanks for having me.
Well, you've been pretty busy. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in America. What, if you could, for the listeners, catch listeners up a little bit on what you've been doing and some of the projects you've been working on, and really appreciate all the things I've been seeing on the Constitutional Sheriff and Peace Officer Association website as well.
Well, primarily, we're trying to get everybody in the Patriot community and in the freedom movement, whatever we call that, I guess, to really focus on, I think, the most vital issue in America right now, and that's the innocent people who've been imprisoned. And it's quite alarming how ubiquitous it is. It's so prevalent, and these federal judges who are not only the Bundys, and as a matter of fact, I'll tell everybody, I don't even care if you agree with what the Bundys did or didn't do, either in Bunkerville or Burns. I don't care if you side with them or don't side with them, or you thought it was ill-conceived, or if you agree with Bunkerville but don't agree with Burns, or vice versa. I really don't care. But what's happening to them now is an absolute outrage, and what this Judge Gloria Navarro is doing is such a treasonous and un-American criminal episode that she is now, as Frederick Bastiat put it, the law and the public servants have now become the crimes and the criminals. And she's not even close to being alone. I mean, I wish it was an isolated incident. But Judge Brown, who heard the case in Burns, whose courtroom I testified, she was way out of line. And she sat there and watched afterwards when the Bundys and others were found not guilty. And she sat there and watched while the U.S. Marshals tackled and tased Ammon Bundy's attorney. And there's even been a documentary about it, and the assistant attorney even said on national television, probably international television, my wife and I watched the documentary, where she actually told the attorneys that she took it personal if anyone was found not guilty in her courtroom. Well, that was very evident. And then Judge Danny C. Reeves in Kentucky, in Lexington, where he sentenced Sam Gerard, an Amish farmer, an innocent man, probably the most innocent among us. And the judge goes through, and I was there, but by the way, I've been to a lot of different courts like that, I guess, and And here's this Amish farmer, Sam Gerard, because he made a salve out of chickweed, and then the FDA used some stratagem against him and lied and pulled some shenanigans against him, and he took it personal when they lied and didn't keep their word to him. So he decided, he told them, he says, well, now I'll not have anything to do with you now. You're liars, and I'm not going to respond to any of your court pleadings or documents or summonses or warrants. And he didn't. And I actually had the sheriff there ready to defend him in that. But the U.S. Marshal sneaked in and arrested him anyway. Well, his crime was simply, and the judge even reiterated this when he sentenced him, he said, he hasn't given me any reason to be lenient. In other words, he offended the court. He didn't bow down and kiss our ring, and he didn't bow down and apologize, and for whatever he was supposed to apologize for, but that's what they wanted. He has been obstinate, and the judge even used that word, obstinate. In other words, Sam Gerard was, and one other thing, and he didn't register with the FDA. In other words, he didn't ask permission to have a pursuit of happiness and a job and a business, and he did not get permission from the FDA to have this. And so all of that now for being obstinate or stubborn and not bowing down to us and recognizing our power and our position and our nobility, then we're going to sentence him to 72 months in prison. And again, he has hurt no one. I've even taken his chickweed salve to my high school class where I actually teach high school government and economics at a local charter school in the Phoenix area. And I've told the kids, our scholars there at the school, I've told them the story, and I said, any of you who would like to use this chickweed salve so you can write the judge a letter and tell him that you used it and it hasn't caused any harm to you, that let's do it. So we've already devised some of those letters. But this is the thing, Matt. I can't think of anything happening in America that is a more vital freedom issue than for all of us. And by the way, I have done a video about this with Ted Nugent. It's on YouTube. Just hit the search engine on YouTube for Sheriff Mack and Ted Nugent. You'll see the video. It's only a couple of months old. But it tells a story about Cox and Kettler and about all these other people, the Hammonds, of course, and this Sam Gerard. And another friend of Ted Nugent's, who was also taken to prison, tells a story about Kenneth Wright out in California, who had his home ransacked and kicked in the door, and a no-knock warrant used to go after his estranged wife, who doesn't even live there. And they kick in the door and go after him and traumatize him and his children and kidnap him for 6 hours, put him out in a hot police car while they ransack the home, looking for evidence for her not paying off her student loan. And now we have video evidence also of this happening in Houston and around Texas. 1,500 now warrants have been issued for people who have failed to pay back their student loans. The federal government has lied about this. They said there was some other fraud going after Kenneth Wright and his wife. This is not. They've made it very clear. They are now using SWAT teams and the U.S. Marshal's Office to go after people for simply not paying off their loans. And Matt, I know you're a lawyer, and I'm not a lawyer, but I'll tell you right now, I know for a fact that a loan, a student loan, and you default on that loan, that is not a criminal matter. That is a civil matter. If I loan a bank of money, they cannot send a SWAT team to raid my home, nor can the federal government. And this is an outrage. And all of these SWAT teams being used by the Department of Education now, and all of these innocent people going to prison, is the worst abuse I've ever seen in my life. The Hammonds being in prison as innocent as they are. Sam Gerard, an Amish farmer, and all the other SWAT team raids going on against Amish because they don't pasteurize their milk. Cox and Kettler out of Kansas, who Eric Holder tried to make an example of, to show that federal law supersedes state law on gun control laws. These guys, all they did, one, actually purchased a muffler, as Ted Nugent calls it, or a silencer for a gun. A muffler. So making a muffler, and one made one. I think it was Shane Cox who actually fabricated it, manufactured it. The other guy bought it. Police also bought several of these for their weapons. And yet Cox and Kettler are now felons for the rest of their lives. They didn't have to do jail time because the judge acquiesced and didn't give them jail time. But he admitted that they did not have any criminal intent, and yet he makes them felons for life. And one of them is actually a handicapped Marine, a veteran. And this is what we do to him to prove to him the America that he fought for and risked his life for, who his daughter is now serving as a Marine. This is what we do to these people, but innocent people are being put in prison, and that's our main project. We've got some other things going on, yes, and we have a training seminar coming up October 21st in the Mesa area. If anybody wants to go to the best constitutional training, and there's going to be sheriffs there. In fact, Sheriff Brad Rogers from Indiana is going to be our guest speaker. But we want to invite people to that because first of all, we want people to understand that the solution is still local officials, especially sheriffs, working with our people in defense of our freedom and defense of our Constitution, and that we, the American people, need to get together and coalesce and get these other people out. And we're still trying to get this in front of Trump. And I will tell you right now, and I'm going to call out some people who you probably know and like and trust, but I talked personally to Rand Paul's assistant, his legislative aide by the name of Randall Meyer. I personally spoke with Ron Paul about getting this done. Ron Paul poo-pooed it. And Ron Paul's been asked to speak at a rally for the Bundys in Las Vegas next month. And he said he would if he got $50,000. And so this type of thing, Ron Paul is so much about money, and he's always about fundraising. And when the chips are down for him to take a stand for innocent people who are in prison, I'm going to say this again. I think it's the greatest crime going on in America today, and so does Ted Nugent. It is the greatest abuse. It is the greatest crime that we actually have judges who are supposed to be defending the innocent, who are supposed to be promoting justice and making sure that justice wins at our federal courts. We have judges doing just the opposite, destroying the Constitution, not allowing people to have bail and then keeping them in prison and purposely trying to keep them there, intentionally postponing, witness tampering, and doing everything they can to be a co-prosecutor in these cases. And prosecutors actually encouraging judges to do this to people like Sam Girard. He doesn't show any contrition, so he needs to go to prison. Do you know what? And I know you know this, but for first offense child abusers, you don't get 72 months in prison. For first offense heavy drug dealers, you don't get 6 years in prison. And yet this man, an innocent man who's never hurt anybody, who offended the FDA, is now serving 72 months. And Ron Paul wouldn't help him, and Rand Paul, who is his senator, would do nothing to help. And I am really sick of this. I have taken it extremely personal because I'm telling you, you don't have an America when we have innocent people like these people that I've just mentioned and many, many more who are now sitting in prison while the rest of us are busy worrying about Obamacare or repeal and replace, which I think is a farce anyway, and all of these other mundane things going on. And we're worrying now about whether NFL players kneel down before a game.
I do want to say, Sheriff Mack, that I've never known Ron Paul to be about money. I mean, I've had many interactions with him. I've never known him to be about money. I'm shocked at that.
Yeah, me too. Well, I'm not either, really, because when I talked to him in person about helping with this, he just poo-pooed the whole thing. And I said, I'm asking you to get your son, Rand, and get moving on this and help us with this. Oh, well, it happened to me, and they came after me in my campaign. I said, did they put any of you in prison? Oh, well, no, so I'm telling you right now, Ron Paul and Rand Paul have done nothing. And I knew you'd be surprised by it. But I'm telling you this, too. I just talked to Deb Jordan, and she asked Ron Paul to speak and help at the rally for the Bundys in Las Vegas. And she's the one that told me he wouldn't do it unless he got 50,000.
So the rally in Las Vegas, if you can tell, because this is the first I've heard of it, so if you could tell the listeners a little bit about when it is, where it is, all that good information.
All right. I believe it's October 14, 15, and I don't have a flyer on it yet because it was going to be the first weekend in Las Vegas. I just talked to her. It was going to be at your friend and mine, Michelle Fiore's place.
Yeah.
Because they lost their venue. And then I said, how many people can you hold there? And she said 200, 250. And I said, man, I tell you, we can get a better place than that. And I said, if you need help to get a better place, you could get a convention room at the Tuscany where, darn well, we held our CSPOA convention once. And I said, you got to get a better location than that. I said, I love Michelle and I love her home, but I said, we could get thousands of people there, and I think you'll have a lot more people that want to be there than 200 or 250. So I made that suggestion to her. So I think she's still trying to work on that. But I'll go. I told her, I said, I'll come to the rally no matter what. I don't care where it is. But I'm really worried that the patriots, the people who like you and me, who really are so concerned about freedom, that we're forgetting about these innocent people who are sitting in prison. And I think we all need to focus and refocus on doing whatever it takes to get these people out, and yes, in a peaceful manner. But the easiest solution, and Ted Nugent and I both agree on this, is get it in front of Trump and have Trump start using these pardons instead of just for Joe Arpaio, which we know now he can do them, and he will do them, because we see the example of Joe Arpaio. There's a lot more innocent people that are facing federal charges than just Joe Arpaio, and we want a commission formed so that we can get all these names in front of the president so that we can get these people pardoned. And quite frankly, Stuart Rhodes said this when he and I were speaking in Washington, D.C., and he's so right. We actually expected these kind of prosecutions if Hillary Clinton had won. And I really don't think that this has gotten in front of Trump. I'm not blaming him yet, because I do not know for sure if Roger Stone or any of the other people that are close to him have put this in front of him where he goes, you know what, we can't drain the swamp and we can't make America great again. Well, we have Amish and innocent people in prison.
This issue has been put in front of Trump. It has been. And I appreciate, too, the fact that, Rep. Dorothy Moon and the rest of those former and current legislators in Idaho sent the letter, as well as Raul Labrador sent a letter to A.G. Sessions asking him, because it's their constituents, asking him, hey, can you look at this, pardon it? Do we really need to spend more money on a prosecution when these guys have been found innocent in two separate trials along the same fact patterns? I mean, this, at what point?
Wait, well, let me ask you your first one. How do you know this has got in front of Trump?
Well, I know for a couple reasons. One, when there was a Free the Hammond tweet that went out, at Real Donald Trump retweeted it. Number two, there are individuals that I know that have brought this issue up directly to him. And the problem, I think, right now is probably timing in how to make this happen. And then there's probably pushback as well from the lower levels of the Attorney General's office to say, hey, you shouldn't be interfering in existing prosecutions. I think that's why they were so quick to make the decision to prosecute a third time, so that there couldn't be any interference with it, as it were.
Well, that's exactly what the Attorney General is supposed to do. And
I'm with you.
If he sees innocent people and ridiculous cases and multiple prosecutions going after people 3 and 4 times after they're hung juries, I think that's a telltale sign. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of court cases that don't happen a second time, let alone now 3 on some of these people. And the charges are ridiculous in the first place. And you know what? There's never been any charges against the federal government for doing the same thing they're charging people, Eric Parker, for at Bunkerville. And there is no way they can prove that he was pointing a gun at anybody, let alone federal agents. They cannot prove that. and it's impossible to prove it. And proving criminal intent on what he was doing is also impossible. And the lack of justice going on in those courtrooms, and the fairness is completely gone in all of them. And so forgive me, Matt, but I still am not positive that there's any way to prove that this has actually been in front of Trump, except for that thing maybe about the retweet about the Hammonds. But what are people doing to make sure that gets there? Now, I've talked to about 65 different congressmen and senators in Washington, D.C. I went there twice only to talk to the Freedom Caucus people, any other senators and congressmen who would talk to me. I was there just going door to door in their offices. In fact, I got tired of wearing my boots in there. I really wished I had taken some other types of shoes because it was really a long walk. You've been there before, and it's really, really huge. And I got a lot of walking in. I actually got to know my way around in there a little bit, which it looks like a maze when you're in there. But I dropped it off in Mike Lee's office. I didn't get to talk to him in person. I did talk. I was in Jeff Sessions' office before he became Attorney General. And about, 3 years ago, he asked sheriffs across this country to come to his aid in doing a press conference about illegal immigration. So the CSPOA paid for about 5 sheriffs from across this country to actually attend that. When I went in his office and reminded his staff that I actually did that and I would like to talk to him, they were the rudest of anybody. They basically said, okay. In fact, they didn't basically. This girl in the front office, there was 3 of them, and I was talking to them. One of the guys was kind of respectful, and I'd shown him my card. And after I told him, she goes, okay, we'll get him the message. Okay, fine. And I said, so is that your way of telling me to get out of here? You're kicking me out now? She goes, well, yeah, you've got yours, we've got your message. So, and they were the rudest of anybody, and there were some pretty rude ones, but Jeff Sessions' office was the rudest, and I really think that we need to put more pressure on him. This thing about him supporting any of these prosecutions is absolutely ridiculous. It's absurd. It's counterproductive. It's un-American. It's contrary to what his job is. He's supposed to be overseeing these prosecutions and stopping them. He could have stopped the prosecution against Joe Arpaio, which was a big waste of time and money. He could stop these prosecutions going on right now, and he should. And for anybody to say, well, he shouldn't interfere, who's telling him not to interfere? That's what his job is. His underlings are telling him not to interfere? Well, none of these people, let me tell you right now, I sat down with so many of these different ones. Louis Gohmert from Texas, he has done nothing. The best congressman from Arizona, Andy Biggs, Paul Gosar, Trent Franks, those people are all pretty good friends of mine, especially Trent Franks and Andy Biggs. They're doing nothing about this. Andy Biggs writes a letter to the president to have him pardon Joe Arpaio, but he wouldn't do it for any of these other innocent people. And I've sat down in his office twice with him in D.C., showing him the list of these people. And then at one time he comes back and tells me, oh, well, there was actually somebody that got a rash from that chickweed salve from Sam Gerard. And I said, here, you use it. Here, let me give it to you. Let you use it for a month and have anybody in your family use it. I use it all the time. It's as innocuous as Vaseline. And so the FDA got somebody to say they actually got a rash. They couldn't prove it was a rash. Even if it was, then tell him to get his money back or tell him to take care of it with Sam Gerard. You don't need a SWAT team from the FDA
clearly,
a guy to prison for it.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, you have a SWAT team raiding an Amish farmer, raiding anybody else for that matter. It just doesn't make any sense. And I want to be really clear, too. I agree with you. I think that the largest problem that is in the governmental structure right now is that they're having a hard time firing these bureaucrats 3 and 4 levels down because instead they give them deference. And that's not the case. True leadership should fire those people, get them out of the way if they're not going to do the right thing.
Well, that's it. And there's just nobody doing it anymore, and they're so isolated. because there's just it's too legion. You know, the existence of all these bureaucrats, they just become powers to themselves because nobody's watching them. And it's almost impossible to watch over them, and the supervisors that are out there simply aren't doing their job. And, you know, somebody needs to take the bull by the horn and get this done. But sooner or later, we're going to have to know whether Trump is going to stand for freedom and really drain the swamp, or he's just going to talk the talk. And, you know, right now I have to question what in the world he could be doing stumping for Strange out in Alabama when we have a wonderful patriot known as Judge Roy Moore running for that position. And now Trump is actually starting to backpedal a little bit on his endorsement of Strange, and you know, it's just amazing what this country is doing and where we're going. And instead of standing for true patriots and the courageous Judge Roy Moore, we have the mainstream Republican getting all the attention and support from the president. And so, again, I'm going to, before I turn on Trump, and he might not care if I ever do, but I will say this. I voted for Trump, and I'll tell you why I voted for Trump when I could have voted for a third party. The reason I voted for Trump is because he was willing to stand against both parties, which you and I have also done. But I don't care what party anybody is. If they'll stand for what's right, and if they'll criticize those who are wimps and criminals when it comes to standing for our Constitution and freedoms, then that's the reason I voted for him. I thought he ran a very stupid campaign. I think he's even showing that now. He cannot control his mouth or what he gets involved in. He should not be involved in this NFL thing whatsoever. He's making it worse. It is not his purview, and I would expect the president to be much busier. If he would spend as much time on this issue and these other ridiculous issues that he gets in arguments about with people, and spend that time dealing with the innocents in prison and the injustices going on in our country, the Bundys would already be home. The Hammonds would already be home. Cox and Kettler would have their felonies removed from their record. Sam Girard would be home. And there would be no more Department of Education SWAT teams in this country. And these programs would be getting rid of. And instead, they're allowing the leftovers from the Obama administration to continue.
So in the last minute we have a very quick minute. Could you plug your website and also mention the Freedom Coalition very briefly, what it is?
Okay, thefreedomcoalition.com. You can go to that. You can get on our website the CSPOA form specifically for that, or you can get all the information of CSPOA.org. And then, again, that's Constitutional Sheriffs Peace Officers Association, CSPOA.org. We'd love to have any of you come to our training out here in the Phoenix area on October 21st. It'll be an all-day training seminar, but, man, you're really going to want to be there.
Now, the Freedom Coalition, really briefly, is what?
It's just a group of freedom groups. It's a list of people all over this country. Judge Andrew Napolitano's on there, Ted Nugent, Larry Pratt. I think you're on there.
Yes.
Sam Bushman. There's a lot of different ones. But really what we want now is for the people on that list to do more. Contact your Republican, especially Republican, but contact any representative. We don't care what party they are. And we hope everybody will get involved in standing for freedom and get these innocent people pardoned and out of prison and get Jeff Sessions and President Trump to do something about it.
All right, Sheriff Richard Mack, thank you very much for joining me on Patriot Radio once again. I really appreciate everything you're doing, and please make sure you share the rally information with me. I'd like to get that out through our network here in Washington.
I will. As soon as I get it, I'll get it over to you.
All right, God bless and Godspeed.
Thanks, Matt.
If you get a chance, go to CSPOA.org, CSPOA.org, that's the Constitutional Sheriff and Peace Officer Association, and he's very adamant about the peace part of Peace Officer. I want to highlight a couple things as well. There are a lot of people out there working behind the scenes to try to get Trump to pardon the Bundys and the Hammonds, among many others, actually. And some of that stuff, I think, takes time, and it takes specific media cycles. And again, I'd really want to highlight the efforts of Representative Dorothy Moon in Idaho to get that letter to Attorney General Sessions from so many legislators there, because Ammon Bundy is a constituent, and that was very appropriate for them to do that and really weigh in and say, really, do we need to be prosecuting hardworking ranchers when we could be prosecuting radical Islamic terrorists? Seems like it should be a matter of priorities. And it also seems like that hardworking ranchers that are protesting a legitimate grievance that has been going on for years and years and years, where their property is literally being stolen or functionally disallowed. Shouldn't we encourage righteous indignation? Shouldn't we encourage that? I think so. And I'm going to do one last check here to see if we've got any election results in for the primary with Judge Roy Moore. It does not look like it. It does look like, though, that as of the last poll that I saw, he was leading by 10 points. So thoughts and prayers down there to Judge Roy Moore. It'd be a great addition to the United States Senate. And we need to come together. You know, the Freedom Coalition is a great idea, and you should check that out online as well. We need to come together, and we need to fight these continual overreaches, because it seems like it occurs no matter what administration is in power, and that is because the bureaucrats have become institutionalized, and we've got to drain that swamp. We have to. Well, this is Matt Shea. Thank you very much for joining me on Patriot Radio today. If you get a chance, say a prayer for our veterans and those in our first responders. They need it. May God bless all of you. May He make this generation the greatest one.